Hello, friends and neighbors. Welcome back to the studio class here at Low Brass. Where we're not afraid to try something
new
if it will help change your point of
view.
I am your fearless co-host, Connor, and with us today is our leader, the commander of this outfit, Mr. Zach.
Welcome.
I definitely think that was an appropriate use of that effect. I was surprised that it was as appropriate as it ended up being. But I think I'll allow it.
Anything to up the showmanship of the show and the production quality.
So what are you using? Is that a native thing to something? Like what do you have there?
Funny you should ask. Not that this is a sponsored gear plug or anything, but we got a little rig going on here. This is it's a Zoom
G14
multi-effects processor. It's a guitar loop pedal with a bunch of other
effects.
And, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. This is my partner's. I don't tell her I'm using it for the stream.
Yeah, luckily there's no paper trail. Like there's no way she could ever figure it out.
There's absolutely no documented evidence of this interaction ever occurring.
Keith Packman had I haven't connected the comments thing, so I can't put Keith's comment on screen. One moment. Connected. Let's see. Is it working? Refresh. There we go. Best new intro. This is what you should do forever. Very good, Keith.
Thank you, Keith. Yes, I think this is going to be a mainstay in the show from now on. Every word with an ooh sound from now on. No, not necessarily, but yes, I have secret plans to start a trombone metal album with this. So stay tuned. Mark your calendars.
I've definitely thought about getting something involved along this line.
It's like one of those things. It's not practical, and it's like the juice is not worth the squeeze. Like, let's be like abundantly clear about like, does the art world need the trombone metal album? But when you're sitting in your living room and you've got the output set to your headphones and you're listening to the loop pedal and you put like the Destructo distortion patch on and all you hear is like the clear attack from the pedal separating every note, and you've got these like super clean arpeggiated lines from your trombone, you start to think things. You're like, wait, this actually, like right now, this is a dumb idea, but in this moment right now, like I'm getting the good feelings from what I'm hearing. And,
all right.
I mean, valid? I don't know.
Yeah, I think only time will tell.
Only time will tell.
Brian's hitting us with an early question. If you had to play the same gig for the rest of your life, what would it be? I don't think that there is one. I think that, at least for me, that's the point, is like I like having a varied working, situation. I
would say that I have a little bit more of a specific scenario for this, because it's like this would be kind of like I'm imagining this in sort of a dreamlike realm of fantasy where some like elements of reality might not matter as much. Like if I'm stuck in a room playing the same gig for the rest of my life, then the gig triangle that people always talk about for like freelancers of like pay, quality of music, hang sort of thing, I think that I would gravitate towards the quality of the musicians that I'm hanging out with, and I guess I would just like people that I'd be willing to spend the rest of my life in a room with playing music. That would be far more important to me probably than the pay because you're stuck in the room. What are you going to do? Pay rent for the house you can't go to anymore? I don't know. But if it was like a daily, if I had to have like a Friday night gig, I had to pick one for the rest of my life, what would I do? That's really tough. I would think that if I could do anything, I would like to have like some sort of steady thing where the object of it was to produce new music on a regular basis, composing for a band, and getting that band tight. That would be like my favorite thing. And whether that's jazz or it's like a chamber thing, I don't know if that's super important, but just like being able to regularly see like the same, like if it was like a quintet, have the same 5 musicians every week and bring something new every week and hone that craft. That would be like ideal. I would trade that sort of gig, even if it was like just at like a dive bar or at a retirement home or an ice cream parlor. I would take that over like some really high paying corporate event or a fancy orchestra gig or something like that. There's my answer.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's a better answer than my answer. But yeah, I mean I definitely don't think I don't know. It's so hard because it's like that's what I worry about with any sort of like permanent gig that I could get is just like, but what about the other stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Like
that FOMO.
Fear of missing out. It's anything that I could get. It's just like, but that doesn't include this other thing. Like, how many gigs are there where I get to play orchestral tuba and jazz trombone? Can you play the instrument? What instrument? I don't know what we're talking about here. Are we talking about the trombone behind me? I can play it, but it's far and my microphones aren't set up for that. I do have a surprise for even Connor is none the wiser of what the surprise is going to be. I don't know when I'm gonna release it. I think you're gonna have to carry the show for a few minutes while I get everything ready for that.
All right.
But we might have to do a little bit of something. So that's all I'll say at this juncture.
All right, I can carry the show. I've got an entire pedal board at my disposal. We can really entertain for days.
We're not ready yet. I'm just saying if you're on the stream and you're thinking maybe I should stay, but I don't know, it might be boring. I gotta say I don't think it's gonna be boring whenever that secret comes out.
I see.
And again, even Connor doesn't know. Connor doesn't know. No, nothing on that one.
I'm not sure how to respond to that.
But you do understand the joke?
Nope.
The song Scotty doesn't know. Scotty doesn't know. Yeah,
I'm supposed to know that.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, I do have at least a couple of topics that I'd like to kind of go through today. One of them was presented by a subscriber, Tom, who is also, I believe, the single patron on Patreon. So hopefully Tom found his way to this stream. I don't know that he did or not. But if not, I'll definitely point him to this stream because he had some questions about valve oil. And I won't claim to have all the answers on valve oil, but I do have a few thoughts. And I imagine you have some thoughts about oils in general, but I got to be honest, Connor, your valves aren't always as oiled as I'd like them to be.
They're a little crunchy.
Whenever I tell some of my students that there are some professionals that I know that they're especially with trombone valves, that their valves aren't what they should be, I might be thinking of you, Connor.
Do as I say, not as I do.
What do you
I'll
say?
say to that. I say keep those things squeaky, but in reality, I say live in the crunch.
Yeah, yours are clanky.
Things get done. You know what? Things get done in the crunch zone. When it's crunch time, who are people calling? They're calling me, just Captain Crunch, on the Thayer.
You're gonna get a trademark infringement by saying Captain Crunch.
I should, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But yes. So some thoughts on valve oil, because this kind of came up with. I gave a couple of my students at Tarleton a hard time about this over the last few weeks, because it just seemed like you know when you have those days of teaching where it feels like one after one the students are coming in with the same issue, and you're just like,
yes.
I just spent the last hour dealing with this. It's like we don't have time to talk about it. Just here's the solution, and that problem was it was like I think 3 euphonium players that day, and all of their valves were having issues. And they all played on really nice instruments. They all played on, $9,000 Besson euphoniums. And it's just like, they shouldn't be having any issues.
Right.
At the end of the day, I think what's really important, people think it's like, I need a fancy instrument. You need a well-maintained instrument. That's more important than it being fancy or being like the most expensive thing. And there is, one point that I'm definitely trying to make is that this is no fault of Besson. Besson did not make bad valves. What happened was Besson's very good valves that they made were very poorly maintained, which then in turn made them bad valves.
Yes.
So the first thing that is definitely important is oil them. And, just to make sure we're all kind of clear on what that means, because we don't all know everything. And again, I don't claim to know everything about oiling valves, but when we oil a valve on a piston horn, we take it out, take the whole valve out. Doing this the wrong way. I should do it this way. I'm trying to have it be seen on camera. We take it out, we oil the whole valve. You can do too much, but you probably won't. I wouldn't worry about that.
Now I'm worried about it.
Now you're worried about it. I shouldn't even brought it up. I usually say that you can't over-oil a valve, but I know that that's technically not true. So it hurts to say something that I know to be a lie.
I see.
But really, the amount of people that are over-oiling a valve are very limited. So we want to take out the valve and oil it that way. I don't have any valve oil on my desk to actually demonstrate that. I'd have to go get it. Or no, that's
started an entire oil spiel.
Okay.
Oil on your
I do
desk.
have
Come
some.
on.
I do have some back here, I think. Yeah.
Give the people what they want.
Okay, so we take out the valve, and it's just hard to do with the microphone in the way. But
I understand.
I will do one, even though it's inconvenient.
Nothing in life is easy. Things we want, Zach.
So we take out the valve. We take our nice valve oil, which is hard with the safety lock in my left hand. There we go. And we oil it, and for me personally, I'm oiling it definitely more instead of less. I want to see a little bit drip off. Yes, that's wasteful. In general, I don't like being wasteful, but I'd rather be a little bit wasteful on the oil than have to buy new valves because the valves are ruined. And we place it back in, and we're good to go. We do that for all of the valves, and always give the people what they want. My dad is correct. So we want to oil them every day. And if we want to be technical about it, it's not just every day. It's before and after you play every day. Do you know why, Connor?
Why?
Because the oil is also a cleaning agent.
Seems like a lot of work, I'm going to be honest with you. Sounds like a lot to do.
It does seem like a lot of work. But do you know how expensive new valves are? Or
true.
Getting a whole new horn because your valves are in bad shape? Or do you know what it's like when your valve doesn't work and you're on an important gig and then your instrument fails and you don't play the gig well and then you get fired?
This is true.
I
live a fast-paced lifestyle. My motto is if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space.
That is not your actual motto.
Okay, fair. So the valve oil acts as a cleaning agent. After you have played the horn, you are to oil the valves again before you put it in the case.
Correct.
Because you have been exhaling through the valves and everything is strange and gross.
Yeah, and you're getting some of your saliva in there. I don't care if you, literally, I brushed my teeth right before this stream, actually. Because I had dinner, and I brushed my teeth right before I played that euphonium.
Inside the valves, wouldn't it be, astronomically more likely that it's just hot condensation at that point?
There's still saliva in there, which is corrosive.
Sure.
No matter, everybody's body chemistry is a little bit different. Some people are more corrosive, but we're all a little bit corrosive at least. So, we want to clear that out by oiling it after we're done playing. So
Yes.
I'll admit, do I do that every single time? No. Should I? Yes. But when I have my students and I ask, when's the last time you oiled your valves? And they're like, if your response is
My response is
yeah, it's too long ago. It can't be If you don't remember, it's too long ago. I don't know how else to say it.
You heard it first here.
So we want to make sure that we're doing it enough that we remember, ideally every day. Especially with my euphonium, every time I get it out of the case, I'm oiling those valves, and I think that that's really important because I don't want to buy a new euphonium.
Oh, sure. Who does?
Euphoniums are expensive. All instruments are expensive. So we don't want to buy a new one or have to replace the valves. And sometimes you can just simply replace the valves. Most of the time you can't. Most of the time it's a huge hassle where you end up just getting a new horn anyway. So valves aren't going to last forever no matter what you do. But I have a student right now who's basically probably going to end up needing new valves because he poorly maintained them for many years. And by many years, I really only mean like 8, maybe even maybe even fewer than that.
Yikes.
And I'm not saying it's totally his fault. There might have been some other factors because he bought the instrument as a demo horn, which like that sounds like it wasn't maintained in that early stage, you know?
Yeah.
It was kind of like a new old stock demo situation. So I don't know that it's actually all of his fault. I actually don't think it is all of his fault. But he probably also didn't maintain it as well as he could have. And now the valves don't work, and he's, thinking about getting a new tuba. And it's it's not great.
It's no fun.
So what I always say with oiling valves is that you need to be doing it before there's a problem. You do it so there's not a problem, not when there's a problem.
Preventative maintenance.
Right. If you're, when do you get your oil changed? Do you get your oil changed when your engine locks up?
I'll quote the famous Hank Hill. I change my oil every 3,000 miles or whenever I get bored, whichever one comes first.
Sure. I don't really know how to respond to that.
It's just I remembered it. I'm so proud of myself.
But yeah, we want to oil our valves before or so that there's not a problem, not when there's a problem. So I had like
3,000 miles or when you get bored. That's the rule.
Yeah, that's the rule. So I had multiple students who just kept coming in there and not their valves weren't working, they were sticking, and there are other factors at play. I'm not going to sit here and say that solves everything because it doesn't. But that's a big part of it. That's a really good starting point. It's just oiling them at least daily. Just do it daily. So one of the other things that came up with one of my students and what came up with Tom, who commented on a video on this channel, was what type of valve oil should you use? Because he bought a tuba recently and the previous owner said, don't use blue juice. And he said to that, but that's what I have. That's what I've been using. Why shouldn't I use blue juice? And, I try to be pretty careful on this platform to not shame a company or talk bad about a product. So the way that I will frame this is there are many good valve oils. There are also many not so good valve oils. And I guess I'll dignify this with a comment on screen. If I can figure out where my mouse is. There it is. Yes, that was a decent Hank Hill impression. We'll give Connor that.
It's nice to be seen. Thank you.
But yeah, so there are multiple good valve oil brands. There are also a lot of bad valve oil brands. Not saying that this is unanimously true, but what I will say is an instrument manufacturer maybe doesn't focus all of their efforts on creating the world's greatest valve oil. Not saying you immediately throw away what came with the instrument, but in some cases it's not so good. Sometimes it's okay. There are some that are decent because they're at least aware of their valve's tolerances and what kind of viscosity, which is like the thickness of the oil. They have some ideas of that, so they might be thinking about the kind of, they might be thinking about that, which might have some benefits. But overall, I'm not very quick to use oil that came with an instrument. So what I will say about brands that are good for sure, Hetman's is a good brand. Monster Oil is a good brand. I know you can't, it's way too bright for this. The light is very bright. Those are both good brands. Ultra Pure is another good brand. There are other good brands. I'm not saying that everything that I didn't list in those three are bad. But what I'm saying is I believe those three to be good. But there's also an element of each instrument has its own needs. So, as an instrument ages, the tolerances, which means, how tight the valve is inside of the valve block, that instrument is going to get looser over time, meaning that you'll need a thicker oil. So most kind of reputable brands have multiple viscosities, multiple thicknesses of oil that they make. So sometimes you might find one that works really well when the instrument's brand new. 20 years down the line, it's not so good. Like with one of my tubas, my C tuba, it's from 1999 is when it was made. I wasn't the original owner, but I'd been using relatively thin oil for a while, and then recently I switched to a more thick oil, and I think that works better. Maybe I should have always been using that, or maybe just over the last few years of me owning it, it's gotten a little looser, and that ended up working better. So there's always a little bit of kind of playing, there's a little bit of playing around with what brand and what viscosity. Like Monster Oil for pistons, I think they have 5 different piston oils. Hetman's, I think, has 4. I'm not exactly sure. And you usually figure out, you try all of them, and then there's one that's like, okay, this is the one. And you get that for 15 years, and it's the best one. But eventually it might not be the best one. You might need something thicker. Brian says Brian uses the same for tuning slide grease and oil, which also is somewhat of a thing too, because sometimes different brands don't work well together. I've heard in extreme cases of 2 different brands creating like an epoxy and, basically becoming like a glue. I think that's pretty rare. I don't think you need to worry about that in a crazy way, but be aware that it could happen, I guess. But I think getting a top tier oil is pretty important. Getting a very quality oil. Whether you have to order it or not, I would try to order it and make sure that you have it, like if you can't find it at your local store. Brass accessories especially are getting harder and harder to find at your local shop. It's unfortunate, but you're probably going to have to go to the interwebs to find what you need. So, one little anecdote that I will share is one of my students at Tarleton, he told me, because I was like, yes, the valve you're using is not good. Again, it will remain nameless, but it was an instrument manufacturer and not the best instrument manufacturer. And it was not a good oil. I was pretty sure it wasn't a good oil. And then I told him to get something else. He ordered it. And when he started using it, he said, the next week he came into his lesson, he said, I thought you were overhyping the better oil. But I saw a huge difference, and I won't go back.
There you go. Something to be said.
So
I have a question.
What is your question?
Kind of going on to like the whole, you said something about you use the valves a bunch and they will become looser over time. You said it in like a specific way, like the inside casing.
The piston versus the valve block.
The valve
or
block.
Valve casing. Valve block is probably not actually. Valve casing is more correct. Valve block is all of the casings together.
So the valve block is like the unit of all the valves?
Yeah, so I kind of misspoke.
So I learned a new word. So the valve casing is the outside, and the piston is going in and out, and for 20 years that's happening. That's going to slowly make that inner chamber just like a little tiny bit bigger every single time.
Right.
But there's also the phenomenon for those of us who are less experienced with pistons and don't know how to use them properly, where the manner in which you're kerplunking might be sideways.
Right. So the way the human hand works is not really conducive to the best valve usage.
Yes,
right. The only, if these are our valves, turn that way. If these are our valves, the only way to go straight up and down is to use our whole shoulder, right, and go all up and down at once. It's probably not how any of us use it. There's really no way to go perfectly straight and down. If you're kind of looking, there's kind of an arc to it, right?
Right.
So obviously there's no way to do it perfectly. I think that's an important thing. But we want to get as close to it as possible of trying to go more or less up and down. What tends to happen, what definitely makes it worse, is I'll have this person remain nameless, but a specific trumpet jazz pedagogue that we're both aware of, who their fingers are always like this on their valves, and then they're complaining that their valves don't come up. It's like, because if you're there, it's a deeper arc, if that makes sense.
Right, because it's closer to the point of rotation, so there's less you can do with your finger to make it more straightish.
Right. So
what do you do in that situation?
So one of my Instagram videos that actually did really well, which is like kind of one of those that like I couldn't explain it, like it didn't make sense to me. But I had one of my students at the time who I was complaining that their fingers were flopping all around, they were doing this. And what I do, and I've been meaning to do it, I used to have coins in my wallet, but I've tried to be better at that instead of stretching out my wallet. But what I'll do is I guess I can kind of demonstrate with, as silly as it is, these SD cards that are on my desk right now.
This is foolish.
But it's something thin, and
keep it on there.
Because the moment that you're pushing down an angle, it's going to slip off. And so we have all of them there, because that's the most efficient way to press those buttons.
I see.
So and then it's one of those like kind of, I call it a mean teacher moment, but I'll do it. In that, like, they're going to fall off pretty quickly, and then you're going to pick them up, and then you're going to try playing that etude again, and then they're going to fall off quickly, and then you're going to pick them up, and then about the third time you hate me. But eventually you'll stop doing it because you don't want to pick up those coins off the ground every 2 seconds.
Interesting.
So that's one of those.
That's the answer I wanted, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a brain thing. It's not like you just need to not do that. You need to do it the correct way.
Right. Why is it bad when I do it wrong? Why can't I just keep doing it wrong and have no negative consequence?
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have the answer that you seek.
That's the answer I wanted.
So I want to get to Joshua's question. But yeah, so the oil, just to kind of put a button on it, better oil is more better. Bad oil is less better, is more worse, more worser, more badder. So making sure that you're using a really good oil and oiling it frequently, I really think that's really what you need to be doing, and what's going to help your valves work the most, then pushing them down correctly as best as you can. But again, knowing that as they get older, you might need a thicker oil. So let's go to Joshua C's question. For an instrument like tuba, what do you tell your students regarding puffy cheeks? So that's a really good question. There's a lot of pedagogy around puffing cheeks. My personal feeling, in general, is that if it sounds good, it is good. So if they're puffing their cheeks but getting an amazing sound,
don't knock it.
If I hear it and I hear also some other problem that I think is associated to it, I might address it. But in general, I wouldn't just put out there that it's unanimously bad, although that is, to me, the general kind of consensus is that puffing your cheeks is bad. And if puffing your cheeks is making things bad, then it is bad. But I can think of a bass trombone player who is a really, really good bass trombone. You know this person, but I'm trying to find a way to describe them without blowing up their spot. It's a person that directed the 4 o'clock at one point in time, before your time at UNT.
I have the memory of a goldfish, so you don't have to throw context clues at me.
So you're saying you don't know who this person is?
I don't remember.
You do know this person, though. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But anyway, they puff their cheeks when they play all the time. If we're going off of looks, it looks bad. If we're going off of sounds, it sounds good. So I guess the main takeaway is don't look for a problem. Like, don't physically look for a problem. If you hear a problem and then see something that you think is related to that problem, then you can address it. And puffing cheeks, it's an interesting thing, because if you watch all the videos on my channel, you'll probably find a video or two of me puffing my cheeks. And my question would be, do you hear it sounding bad, or do you see it looking bad? I have students that puff their cheeks, and I don't correct it because I don't see it as a problem. That being said, it can be a hindrance, and in general, it's only going to be helpful, or I leave it be almost always in the low range on tuba or bass trombone, or pedal range on tenor trombone. If you're puffing your cheeks and it sounds good in that range, I personally don't have a problem. I'm not saying that is unanimous. If you're puffing your cheeks in the mid to high range on those instruments and it sounds bad, maybe it is bad.
Yes.
Hardest solo that you've ever transcribed? That might be a Connor question. Actually, let's make that a Connor question while I get a few things ready. So, can you talk for maybe 2 minutes or so? I'll be right here, but I'm gonna throw you on the screen.
I'll put a button on the puffing the cheeks thing. I would say, like, as a general rule, if I had a student that was like, I'm gonna start playing the tuba, do you recommend that I start with puffed cheeks or not? I would probably say something to the effect of, like, maybe don't. And usually the counter argument when you hear about puffing versus not puffing, people are quick to cite John Burke's Dizzy Gillespie. And the reason that we all know about Dizzy Gillespie's cheek puffing is because it is exactly that. It is the exception, and it's not the rule. And looks cool, but maybe not what you're going for. But specifically with puffing the cheeks, it's only allowed in the trombone world. I can say it's specifically allowed in Baroque music. So you are allowed to puff your cheeks in Baroque music, but the rule states if it ain't Baroque,
don't fix it.
That's my joke for that. I'm just kidding. Don't puff your cheeks in Baroque music unless you want to. Hardest solo I've ever had to transcribe. Hardest ones are the ones, for me personally, the issue is time and the ability to kind of navigate, especially if I'm trying to notate it physically on paper. That's hard. What are you holding?
They can't see yet.
Okay.
Now they can see, but they can't see enough of it. I might have to step away from the camera for a second. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to get this all. I mean, maybe I should turn on this light. With the Yannick Gwizdala, that one? Yeah.
They're like shredding.
I just realized they probably couldn't hear you while only I was on screen, but continue.
Oh, really? Anyway.
Tell what solo that is again, because I think everyone missed that.
Elliot Mason's solo on What Is This Thing Called Love was very difficult for me, partially because it's very creative solo with lots of different ideas in it, and like there's not a whole lot of like things that repeat inside of it, and that was tricky for me. The other thing was that like the time is very intentionally abstracted, and so if you were looking for a good solo of like what does it feel like to play with great time, I mean just cut to the other half of it. Like it's killing, but like they intentionally are going to outer space for a while, and the question
they
becomes,
like outer space.
when you're memorizing it, you have to be able to sing along with it perfectly to know when to come in to play the next note, because it's hard, very difficult to write down like with, regular old notation when the notes are happening. And so it's going to end up being a bunch of weird tuplets and rubatos and yada yadas, and that gets very tricky. So the hardest things for me to transcribe are the things that are not super clear time. So there you go.
I'm gonna play this monstrosity for just a couple notes.
What is it?
So it's a contrabass trombone in the key of B flat.
Wow.
So it is double the length of a normal trombone.
Double slide?
Double slide. Let's see if I can get just like the double slide in there.
More slides, more fun.
There you go. Yeah, it's Six Flags rules.
That's amazing.
Double slide.
Yeah, let's hear it.
With F attachment. So it's the F that's, below. Yeah, it's even bigger. No jazz. Not today. So that's the contrabass trombone in B flat.
So, for those of us, the uninitiated here, who don't,
which is
totally
most of us,
understand the physics of contra bass trombones in B flat, what you're telling me is, all right, so like the partial series on that thing, the pitch that I understand to be a pedal B flat on a regular tenor trombone or bass trombone, that's the second partial?
yes.
So it's like a B flat tuba, but it's skinny and it's slidey.
Yes.
Wow, that's cool. So could you play theoretically like tuba concerti on it for us?
The answer to that is definitely theoretically yes.
Theoretically.
Sorry,
What is it
I'm
like?
putting it away.
Okay, well, you can tell me in your own words. This is your open response question. Describe in your own words the slide action, like the weight of the slide has to be affecting the throw of it all.
Yeah, so what I would say about the slide is better than expected.
Oh, okay.
Still not good. I thought. Yeah, right. It's at least twice the weight.
Yeah.
Did anybody ask for their trombone slide to be twice the weight?
Yes.
Yeah,
Give me that. Hefty.
Not wimpy.
Not wimpy. Get out of here with your carbon fiber. Double me up. Make me twice as long in the slide.
That's an interesting idea, though. Carbon fiber contrabass trombone that doesn't feel awful to hold.
All right. Send out the bat signal to Butler Trombones.
Yeah, just like, can we at Butler Trombones in the chat?
Honestly, with all of the stylistic trends, the aesthetic trends of what is hip for jazz trombone, the logical conclusion to the past decade of innovations in hipness of playing the trombone is that we are all eventually going to play contrabass trombones with carbon fiber slides because we want that bigger sound.
More better?
525 is in now. What's next? 562? Let's put another one in there. Let's double the slides.
So the interesting thing, and I'm gonna pull up some specs to some specifications to make sure that I'm not lying about any of this. Not that I would ever lie, but make sure that I'm exactly correct when I say these numbers. I'm not even going to say them before I find it, but we're going to get to the bottom of this because it's not as big as you might expect. Although this is Woodwind Brass one has conflicting information. I'm going to a different source. Let's go to...
You're talking right now, you're looking for the specs, you're talking about the diameter of the slide, like the millimeters of the bore size?
Yeah, I was going to go with freedom units, but you never heard that?
No.
Here, I'll give you both of them.
Is that some sort of non-fungible unit of measurement?
Sure. It's definitely like, let's see. That's not the right one. That's not the right one. Well, that one does work. Let me just double check that all the audio is there. Yeah, audio looks good. This is not the right one, though. This is the one in C, but I'm almost positive that that's the same bore. But let's see if I can find the correct one. Let's see. There we go. This should be it. So we've got both freedom units and metric system. Can you see that? Maybe I need to go closer.
Oh, there's something blocking it on my screen.
Oh, now this doesn't work either, so I have to go to the other one. This one. So it's probably too small for most people to read, but it's 14 millimeters to 15.6 millimeters, also known as 0.550 to 0.613. So do you know what a normal tenor trombone is, Connor?
547?
Yeah, a large tenor. 547. Okay. So this is it starts out barely bigger than a 547.
Wait, so actually on that thing, on that, so it's dual bore?
Yes, I don't know. It says conical bore on this product page.
Conical? How does that work?
Well, it is definitely not conical throughout the entire slide, but there are 4 lengths. A normal dual bore slide, right, is 2 bores.
Right. So this could be, are you saying this is a quadruple bore?
I don't have that information, but I think that it's worth pointing out that is possible. That each slide length is a different size, and I don't have calipers to measure, and I don't want to do that right now.
It's a shame that the term 4B was already copyrighted.
Right. But yeah, so it starts out where it's actually not, it's smaller than a bass trombone.
That's hilarious. Wait, what did you say, like 5 something?
550. So 3/1000ths of an inch larger than a 547.
Pretty much. Why even do that? Just start 547. It's fine. I won't tell anyone.
Right.
It's a tenor trombone.
Yeah, and then 613 is, so to put in perspective, like most euphoniums on the bigger side, like when you get into the 4th valve, is 610.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I think we've literally talked about it on the show before, and you had the same reaction.
Oh, see? Goldfish. What did I tell you?
But yeah, so essentially, it's really not as big as you'd expect. The bell is not as big as you'd expect. This doesn't say the bell size. Let me see if I can go to another page that has the bell size, because I was questioning how big the bell was, and I don't think it's definitely not as big as you'd kind of think it to be. Yeah, it's a 10-inch bell, which is what I thought.
Oh, wow.
So
it's still big. It's quite large.
But there are bass trombones with 10.5-inch bells. Not that we,
right.
We don't use a lot of those anymore, but
proportionately, if we were thinking like, if it was double the length of a bass trombone, you'd think, okay, it's going to be an 18-inch bell. It's double the length of a 9-inch bell. So that does not. So there are certain things about it that proportionately, it's quite compact.
But the throat of the bell is huge.
Throat of the bell meaning like before it flares out?
Yeah, let's see if we can get a good close-up of this. So you'll have to wait a second to respond to what you see.
Okay.
But essentially, it's just the throat is before, the flare is where it's getting larger the fastest. Mm-hmm. The throat is before that. Or the stem, I don't know if throat and stem are exactly the same in that context. Maybe stem is just a better word overall. Stem is the other portion of the bell that's not the flare.
It's like a flower. The stem of the flower and then the...
Yeah. So are you seeing the picture now?
I am seeing the picture now.
So can you tell that it's...
It looks like, if I didn't truly know the size of the instrument that I was looking at, it just looks like a regular trombone, which is a dinky, like if there was like my trombone, the Edwards, a jazz trombone, if my throat or stem was proportionately the same size and it flared out that much, it would be a tiny little bell.
Yeah, again, like scale is important. You know, seeing it next to something is pretty helpful. But yeah, the stem of it looks pretty huge.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an interesting instrument. I do intend on owning. So full disclosure, this is not my contrabass trombone. This is the university that I work for is contrabass trombone, that I'm spending a little bit of time with to see what it could be useful for, because I'd like to use it in trombone choir if it could be useful. Most contrabass trombones that are used in this country and the rest of the world at this point are in the key of F. So what's kind of interesting about this horn, and I'm probably going to make a whole video about it, but what's interesting about this horn is Miraphone, a German company. This is an American trombone design. So this is a design that was originally designed by Kahn in like 1901 or something. And then this was essentially a copy. And I think one or two of those instruments had a valve put on them. I think there are 4 of them in existence. And hopefully, I've been thinking about this, but hopefully I can have an expert historian who will remain nameless, because I don't know if I can get this person. But I'm hopeful to have an expert historian who owns one of those 4 horns that this was modeled after. And honestly, probably the main one that this was modeled after. One that has a valve. So I'm hoping to get him to talk about it a little bit in that video. But I haven't asked. I think I'm going to be successful. But I haven't asked. So we'll see about that. But yeah, it's a very interesting instrument. I've spent very little time with it, and I haven't done very much mouthpiece searching, and we will get to this bass trombone mouthpiece question. I'm using the mouthpiece that came with it. It accepts tuba-sized mouthpieces.
Oh, wow.
But I kind of have the feeling that I should go smaller than the mouthpiece that it comes with. But every tuba mouthpiece I have is smaller. I only have one that's even kind of close, but they're all at least a little bit smaller. Or sorry, they're all at least a little bit bigger, if not a lot bigger. But I've only tried 2 mouthpieces so far. There's a chance that I was completely wrong and a large mouthpiece actually settles it. I don't think so, but more research required.
Yes.
Before it's all said and done, I will try every tuba mouthpiece that fits.
Right. That
I own. Or if I find something that I think is close and I can get something that I think might work also, I might try that. So that's something that I'm definitely thinking about. But yes, it's a very interesting instrument. I will say I don't have the easiest of time playing it. When you heard me get into the mid to high range, yeah.
It's interesting to hear it, and something that I take away from this is I didn't occur to me that it was accepting tuba mouthpieces, but that makes perfect sense because the length of it is a tuba.
But does it make perfect sense when it has a tenor trombone bore?
Right, but I'm just thinking about the length of the chamber that is resonating. Those are tuba notes, and it's the bore is the thing that's kind of or it's not the thing, that's an oversimplification, but the bore is affecting the sonority, and you think about the length of a tube that is the tuba and what that sounds like, and then the sound that's coming out of the contrabass trombone, it's the same length of thing, it's just a skinnier thing. That's so cool. And when you think about that sort of association, you can kind of, in your mind's eye, kind of make a little bit more sense about what makes a tuba sound like a tuba and what makes a trombone sound like a trombone. And then from that, those different qualities that you hear, like why do we have this instrument that's designed this way, and what is desirable about the sound of a tuba? What is desirable? Why do we make trombones so skinny? Why do we want that snap, crackle, pop? Is the snap, crackle, pop, is that what we want? Can you get that on a tuba? What do you got to do? Those are really cool kind of lingering questions.
Right. So I definitely, in my perfect world, my hope, this is where I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love it to happen, is to have, because this is essentially other than those four, this is the only B-flat contra that I know that is still being made. I'm sure that there are others, but it's the only one I can think of. This is the main B-flat contra that you see, although you don't see a lot of B-flat contras. That being said, I think it would be interesting to compare this to a B-flat contra, this to an F contra, this to a cimbasso, this to various keys of tubas, and play the same passages, and also maybe bass trombone should be thrown in there, maybe even euphonium, maybe piccolo trumpet. No, I'm just kidding, but maybe a lot of different things that are close by that could technically all play, and I think it would be a fun thing for composers to hear, because I had a conversation with one of our mutual friends, Kyle Gordon, who's an arranger, composer, all those sorts of things. And he was kind of asking me what the difference between these sorts of things were. And it's just like, I was kind of just like, yeah, it's complicated. I gave him some feedback, but it's just not so simple. We've talked a lot in the past, just because we're both kind of nerds about it, about what makes all of these instruments different, because so many of these instruments can play the exact same range. Why would you write for one? Is one thing easier on one? Is it harder on other? Or does it just sound different? Someone who plays basically all the low brass instruments, all the main ones, most of the things I could play on any of them. Some of them would be harder than others, but especially isolated notes, most of those can be played on any instruments if it's technically possible. I can play it on any of them, but they sound drastically different. And not necessarily one's bad, one's good, they're just different. Mm-hmm. So that would definitely be an interesting thing. I do want to get to this question. So there'll be some more contrabass trombone content, I promise. If you're interested in hearing just a little bit more, there's a video on my Instagram, which ironically, I guess not technically ironically, but it feels ironic, is the most viewed video on any platform that I've ever had. It's just me playing an out of tune and somewhat unfocused scale on the B-flat contra.
But it looks cool and it sounds cool.
Yes. So let's go to Noodles XZ's question. I'm switching to bass trombone next week for a concert band going on through the rest of marching, or band for marching. Should I get a 3G or a 1.5G mouthpiece to start with? That's an interesting question. Do you have any thoughts, Connor?
As someone who's never switched to bass trombone, I'm probably not the best person to ask first.
But you've played it on you. In some ways, you might be the best person to ask because your bass trombone experience is similar to what I believe this person is going through. What did you? I guess let me phrase it in a question that you probably are more comfortable answering. When you were switching to bass trombone, were you more comfortable playing a mouthpiece that a bass trombone player would probably play, or something kind of in between tenor and bass trombone, or a tenor mouthpiece?
I will tell you with 100% confidence, the times that I have doubled on bass trombone, I have played a tenor trombone mouthpiece. A bigger one, but...
So what, are you at liberty to discuss which mouthpiece, or what mouth?
If someone said, you've got a big band gig tonight, you're playing bass trombone, I would grab my 4, because...
Which is the largest tenor trombone mouthpiece or largest mouthpiece you have, right?
It's the largest one I have, but it's also like, I wouldn't say, if someone was like, oh, I've got a 1 that you can borrow, or I've got a brand new one in a box that you can play, I would probably still err on what I'm more comfortable with.
But you'd probably take it at least, right? Or no?
The 1?
Yeah, the here's a bass trombone mouthpiece, try it. If you don't like it, that's fine.
Oh, sure, free mouthpiece is free mouthpiece.
Well, not free, just like you're trying it out.
Yeah, I would give it a shot, but I feel like my apprehension, and maybe this is nearsighted, I feel like I would get tired a lot easier on the bigger setup, and maybe would like fumble the football in the moment on bigger equipment that I'm not used to.
Yeah, so I think that my answer encompasses your answer. Is this a short-term thing or is this a long-term thing? And I think the timeline that this person gave, it's kind of in between. You're referencing, I'm playing this one gig.
I guess that is unfair.
And moving on. They're talking about maybe at least a few shows. But they're not talking about playing bass trombone for the rest of their life.
Right.
So what I'll say is my experience, quote unquote, switching to bass trombone or adding bass trombone. So I guess it's important to maybe give a little bit of context. I think this has been somewhat covered, but maybe not. Probably not very much on this channel. It's more of I started playing, my first brass instrument was playing baritone, euphonium. Then I switched to tuba, and I stopped playing euphonium basically at all. And then in high school, I added trombone, but I started with bass and then moved to tenor. So that kind of shows where I came from. So I don't really count the switching from tuba to bass trombone, because that was just like, I played the mouthpiece that was in the case, 'cause that's all I had. I didn't really think anything of it. To me, it was more like, this is bass trombone. Mm-hmm. That's what I got. But switching, adding, that was a school horn, and then I started playing tenor. I basically didn't touch bass trombone again until I bought my own, which was sophomore year of college. And at that point in time, I got a Dennis Wick 1 AL Heritage, which is maybe the only mouthpiece that I've ever sold. And I sold it to our mutual friend Nick. And so I used that for a while, knowing that my kind of philosophy was somewhat like what you were saying, or maybe even somewhat what this person is saying, is that all my friends were playing zeros from Dennis Wick. That was like, a really common mouthpiece at North Texas at that time, partially because of Vern Kagerice and Dennis Wick, the person, their friendship. So the school was kind of getting a lot of new stuff from them. And I think a few years prior, the Heritage line came out. So you were seeing a lot of Heritages pop up at UNT. And the Zero AL was kind of like the bass trombone. It was just like, yeah, just go get a Zero Heritage, from Dennis Wick, and you'll be happy. And so I knew that, but I was like, I'm more of a tenor trombone player. I should probably go one size smaller. And I got a 1. And that lasted maybe 3 months, and I got a 0, and then I switched to that permanently. Huh. That being said, a 1 is not a in-between mouthpiece. I would say a 1 is a bass trombone mouthpiece. It's just not the one that everybody was playing, and it's not the one that ended up working for me. Since then, I have purchased a 1 again, or I've received a 1. Like I have a 1, and I do play it a good bit. It's not a Heritage 1, not that really matters in this context of this conversation, but I like playing the 1. I still prefer the 0. When I got the 1, I was like, this is way better. I'm switching to this. The 0 is going to be collecting dust, and I went back to the 0. I guess my immediate answer would be, which, it's funny that my father was in the chat earlier. I don't know if he's still there, but one of the things he taught me was answer the question simply first and then give follow-up information, which I did not do just now. My simple answer is, if you have one of those, go with the one you have, unless you feel like it's a problem. If you have both of them, go with the one that you think is better. And then if you have neither of them, that's where we really need to make some sort of a guess. And it's really just a guess at the end of the day of which one you think will be better for you. So it's tricky. The best answer would be go try them out and take home which one you think works out better. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that's not an option for most of us. Yeah, my father is still in the chat. So he taught me something I just clearly didn't get it. I remembered a little too late. But yeah, so if you have one of them, go with that one mouthpiece, unless it's like, this isn't working. I keep trying. I'm practicing. I can't get this to work. At the end of the day, every mouthpiece has a strength. Every mouthpiece has a weakness. You can try one and it will work for one thing but not the other, and then the other one will work for this thing but not the other thing. Almost every mouthpiece can do all of those things. You just might have to practice out the problem. I don't really consider a 3G to be a bass trombone mouthpiece. Maybe that's unfair. I would say a 2 or larger is a bass trombone mouthpiece. So in general, I recommend playing equipment that, even if you're a doubler or whatever the case may be, play the mouthpiece that people play. Which, of the 2 mouthpieces given as an option, 3G or 1.5G, there are a lot more people who play 1.5G than play 3G.
There you go.
So it's tricky. It's definitely not a simple answer, at least from my perspective. But yeah, hopefully you'll figure it out. I mean, if you can find a place to try them, or if there's someone in your band that you can try, if you can find something to try, unfortunately that's the best way to do it. And I had one of my college students at North Texas asking me about where do I go to try mouthpieces, and I told him, it's like, well, there's not really a whole lot of places. Fortunately, you attend a university as a tuba player, and it's like you attend a university that has 30 other tuba players. Between all 30 of us, got a lot of mouthpieces. Probably over 100. Not saying someone will have the mouthpiece you want, but there's at least some chance that they'll have something close, or you'll at least be able to try enough things. Use that mouthpiece comparison chart that says the mouthpiece that you want, it's like this very common mouthpiece, and see if you can track it down. A lot of us, that's just not an option, and in that case, you can order a bunch and hopefully find a place that has a good return policy. It's not my favorite thing to do, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what we have to do. I think both of us have been fortunate to, at times in our life, live near places that have a lot of mouthpieces.
It's true.
But like right now, are you by a lot of mouthpiece manufacturers that you could try, or store, retailers that have a lot of mouthpieces?
There's retailers that I could go to right now, maybe a few stores, but they wouldn't it's not like they'd have the full. It's not like when I lived in Chicago and I could go to Dennis Wick and they were like, yeah, we have literally every single one.
Right.
In every amalgamation of every edition of every size and all that.
They might have a 5G. They might have a 6.5.
Yeah, they'll have some from everybody. It's a little bit of everything all the time, as they say.
But even I was looking at Houghton Horns, which is a big retailer near where I live, and they had some Bach mouthpieces. They didn't have a 5G, probably because they just they get a bunch, but they sell them.
Yeah, that's the one to run out of.
Right, but they didn't have it. And it's just that's the most common one to have, and they just don't have it in stock. You happen to live close to a manufacturer in Monette that you could go try, and I'm sure that they have everything in stock there.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'd love to go visit eventually.
But that's one manufacturer.
Right.
And maybe you don't gel with that manufacturer. I know you're not looking for a mouthpiece right now, but that's the struggle, right? Is that you can only try what's near you, and that's why there's a huge used market. And that's, I guess, another good place to go, is to try to find used mouthpieces that are maybe what you think you might want, or close to what you think you might want. And the nice thing about buying something used is if you don't damage it and the price was fair, you can probably sell it for about the same amount if you don't use it very much.
Yep.
So you can try it for a month and then decide, this isn't for me. Sell it to the next person who maybe it works for them. Just because you didn't like it. Yeah.
A disclaimer at this point.
Yeah.
This is a really helpful resource, getting into the mouthpiece selling and trading world that lives on eBay and social media. But it comes with a cautionary tale of you might end up on the endless mouthpiece rabbit hole. It's just like the YouTube algorithm. You can keep swapping till the cows come home.
Right. So that's a danger too, but I think that's something that's at least worth kind of mentioning.
Right.
And another thing too, I mentioned try it for a week. If it doesn't work out, get rid of it. That's maybe not the best way.
Maybe a little longer than a week.
I recently got a mouthpiece that I thought, it's I read specs and I thought would be great. And I'll admit it's maybe not turning out to be exactly what I hoped it would be. But I'm not quite ready to give up on it yet because I haven't played this mouthpiece before. Maybe I'm just not used to it yet. I think I know enough about mouthpieces to know that this isn't going to be the mouthpiece I end up playing. But I'll admit that I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again. So give it some time. I mean, ideally with mouthpiece stuff, it's you've got all summer to try things, and you try it for a month before you give up on it. But again, none of us live in this perfect world. So, yeah, the endless rabbit hole is definitely a caution. And again, if you can, one of the things that I plan to start doing even a little bit more now, now that the kind of things are opening back up and, I'm maybe traveling a little bit more, is when I'm visiting certain places that I know have a mouthpiece shop nearby or an instrument shop nearby, I'll just go and try some stuff out. And if I find something I like, maybe I leave with it. Like a perfect example is where we're both from, Louisville, Kentucky. To my knowledge, Louisville doesn't have any instrument manufacturers or mouthpiece manufacturers, but Pickett is down the road about an hour in Lexington. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you haven't been there, right? I know you played some Picketts, but
I played some Picketts, but I've never been to Pickett.
But both of us could be back there for Thanksgiving or Christmas or something, visiting family, and decide, hey, let's take an afternoon on, and go try some mouthpieces. And ultimately, you want to have someone there with you if you can help it. Because how it sounds to you or how it feels to you is not ultimately the most important thing. The most important thing is how it feels or how it sounds in the room, which you essentially can never know. Which is why,
the tragedy of it all.
Yeah, well, this definitely won't be, common knowledge on this channel at this point in time. Probably not for another maybe not even another 8 or 9 months. But Connor knows that I have plans to try out some instruments, and I want him to be there because I want to hear because I can never know how it sounds, and I need to go with someone that knows how I normally sound and how this differs.
Mm-hmm. And also how you want to sound.
Right. Yes. We've also talked at length, probably to the point where it's maybe even annoying, of how for this instrument that I'm thinking about getting, what sound I'm trying to get in my head and how I feel like I can't get it on what I currently am playing on, or the sound that I want to get at times. It's not necessarily the only sound I want to get. So ideally, when you're trying mouthpieces, trying instruments, practice or trying it in small rooms, trying it in large rooms, and then all of those things having a second set of ears. Ideally, your teacher. That's probably the best person to help you through that. It's probably not an option always, but that's definitely something that I'm always thinking about and trying to make sure that I can do. So yeah, that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. But I don't know that the days were ever there where your local shop had every mouthpiece that you ever wanted.
No, yeah, that's just not practical.
It really, especially for low brass stuff. So sometimes if you have someone who's really in tune with mouthpieces, and they might be able to hear you play and tell you, this is going to be it. And ideally, if you know someone that has a ton of mouthpieces, like when a student comes to me and says, hey, I'm looking for another mouthpiece, it's like I bring all of my mouthpieces that I think are even close and have them play them. Mm-hmm. And that's a benefit of not just me necessarily, but studying with a teacher that has mouthpieces, is that they can, and that some mouthpieces I buy with that intention. I don't think that I'm going to use them necessarily, especially, both of us are Dennis Wick artists, and both of us, I won't speak for you, but I assume, and we've talked about it, we both of us love playing Dennis Wick mouthpieces.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, that might not be what is best for every student, and even then, I think it's good to have some other brands, other options where you might be able to find something that, there are differences between different brands. Yeah. So I think that's kind of an important thing to mess around with, and that's, sometimes that is why I buy a mouthpiece, because I feel like I should have it, like especially standard mouthpieces. It's like, this makes sense for me to have because a student might be interested in or a mouthpiece like it. You gonna say something?
Oh yeah, just one quick thing that just came to my head. I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
You're good.
But one topic that might be fun to deep dive on another day, especially since we're talking about trying out mini mouthpieces, is maybe best practices in sanitation of mouthpieces, because that's something that maybe not every new person to the low brass world might be thinking about immediately, or maybe it's the first thing you think about. That's kind of it seems like that's always the case. It's usually it's oh cool, mouthpieces, we all play them, try this. Or it's wait, but I put it on my mouth. I was people seem to have one of two reactions. to that. So it's definitely the disclaimer of like, if you're going to share mouthpieces with someone or you're borrowing someone's mouthpiece, you gotta wash it.
Yeah, and so you know, soap and water are good. You know, also having like whenever I bring mouthpieces for students to try, I bring like an alcohol spray and have a cloth and just, you know, usually I start with all of them clean and then, you know, I'll clean them later or just kind of, you know, clean them as we go depending on how I'm dealing with it.
And if you are someone that's a student right now at the high school level or somewhere around there, you can clean it acceptably at home and then also ask your teacher if they have some of that alcohol spray. And that would be another, you know, thing that would be, in general, a best practice for something like that.
Yeah, we definitely want it to be clean. That's definitely important. So, you know, usually if you go try out mouthpieces somewhere, they'll say like, hey, like I recently tried out mouthpieces somewhere and they said, hey, just like leave them on this cloth and I'll know that those are the dirty ones and I'll clean them later.
Yeah.
So usually that's kind of taken care of for you, but that's not always a guarantee.
Right.
And especially
at a store,
if
that's going to be
that's what it should be anyway.
Right, it should be.
That's a trait of a good store. But yeah, trying them is really and honestly, you got to take some time with them. That's one of the best. Again, that's one of the reasons why it's nice to study with a teacher who has a bunch of mouthpieces. You know, I just posted a picture on Instagram of all my mouthpieces, and those are not just you know, someone's like, well, why do you need so many? And it's like, well, I don't need so many. But it's helpful, especially some of the mouthpieces that I played. Like one example is the Schilke 67 on tuba. I played that mouthpiece from, I think, 7th grade to the end of my master's degree. That was like the only tuba mouthpiece I really played in that time. I flirted with some other ones, but that's the main one for all of that time. And essentially, you know, I'll never sell that one because it was a mainstay, and even though I've moved on to what I believe to be greener pastures in the Dennis Wick mouthpiece, and I do believe that's not just, you know, Dennis Wick artist speak. That's, you know, I played it, I liked it, I tried it for multiple teachers and respected colleagues that I have, and they all were like, yeah, you sound better on this one, and I agreed. So that's what I started playing, but I can't get rid of that Schilke 67 that I have.
Right.
Because it's like, there might be something that's like, but I remember how easy that was on that mouthpiece, and maybe I can transfer it to the Dennis Wick or something along those lines. Because I think one thing to always remember with mouthpieces is when you change one thing to a mouthpiece, add mass, add cup depth, change cup shape, you know, manipulate the throat, manipulate the back bore, manipulate the rim contour, any of those sorts of things affects multiple things. So you could, and it's not always the obvious thing. It's not always just like you change this, your high range gets better, but your low range gets worse. Sometimes it's your high range gets better, but your endurance gets worse, or your articulation gets clearer, but your sound gets thinner, or your flexibility gets better, but your range is, you know, it could be anything at the end of the day. So when someone's like, this is a better mouthpiece than this one, it's like, almost certainly in some ways, almost certainly not in others. Like I always kind of use the analogy of when you're playing that racing video game with cars, and it's like, this one has acceleration like this one has a top speed like this one's traction is like this. You know, it's like all of these different categories until you unlock that magical one that I don't think exists in the mouthpiece realm. You know, you're dealing with compromises, and maybe for this circumstance this is better. Ultimately, you should probably be able to figure out how to do everything on one, but you might have to work on your endurance more, or you might have to work on your flexibility more on this mouthpiece than another one, or you might have to work on centering your low range. Like the mouthpiece that I'm playing right now on tenor trombone, that one I played for years, and the reason why I switched is I hated the low range. And I won't say that the low range has gotten better. I've gotten better at the low range, but I have to it doesn't kind of take care of itself for me. But I like this. I like the tone. I like the clarity. I like all of that stuff. So I put up with a low range being not exactly what I want it to be, because I can make it work, although it takes a little bit more effort. So yeah, I think that's kind of an important. But yeah, do you have any closing thoughts on that before we call the show for today?
No, I think you rang it home on that one. I don't have a whole lot to say, but yeah, good stuff.
Cool. Well, let's close out the show here with Connor playing a little bit. Full disclosure, Connor's testing out a new microphone, which I believe to be better on the speaking side of things. Not so sure on the trombone, but maybe Connor even has a little effect for us. We're not quite sure as far as that goes.
Do you want me to use the rock and roll reverb for the playing out?
I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of the show,
I feel like I didn't overuse it.
No,
so it's not a dead joke yet. So we'll turn on the
rock and roll. We're living it now. This is showbiz. I can hear myself in like your headphones.
I did make it a little bit hotter from here, but let me just kill a little bit of that. Bypass. Yeah, the one thing when you're talking though, the sibilants, those S's, those are real hot. But yeah, let's hear. Can you play us? Eli, you missed out. I guess you'll have to watch the whole live stream after the fact. But Connor, go ahead and play us out, and let's see what you got for us today.
All right, let's see what we got live from the storm drain.